What's going on, guys? This is Matei with Tech Vitamins, and today we're going to be looking at some Pro Tools. I'm going to be showing you how to set up a mix template so you can start your sessions out with a lot of things already preset, a lot of your buses, your submixes, and so forth, which will make it a lot more efficient for you to record and obviously mix. Then we're going to take a look at what to do while recording in these types of templates. We're also going to check out some mixing techniques and little tips, and then finally we're going to look at how to set up a master session in Pro Tools from the mixing template that we're going to set up. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and open up a new session, and I'm not going to use a template right now because we don't have one yet, so let's create it. I'm going to use a blank session, and I'm going to use it as a 24-bit track at 96 kilohertz. I like to record mine at higher sample rate, and then bounce it down to CD quality 44.1 at 16 bits. And instead of input and output settings as used, let's go ahead and use stereo mix, which is this comes default with Pro Tools 9, and I believe it also should be in Pro Tools 8. So let's go ahead and open this up. Let me go and call this session template, and let's open it up. First thing I usually like to do is set up the visual template, or I guess the windows. And the reason I do this, especially when I have to work with only my laptop on one screen, it makes it easier to access the important windows that you need to access faster. So I set up this kind of pyramid you see up top. I put my workspace window so I can quickly access any type of sample or WAV file, throw it into the edit window. The next line in the pyramid is going to be the edit window. And the last one is going to be your mix, which you'll see all the tracks. And when you see this template, when we're finished with it, this is going to have a lot of tracks, so I can quickly access it just like this, going back and forth. And then, of course, the transfer window is always at the top, so I have quick access to it. Or when I have my MIDI, sometimes I turn it off because I have controls in my MIDI that allows me to control Pro Tools. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead by adding some tracks first. And let's go ahead and add, we do one stereo audio track, 6. Let me also do a one stereo instrument track. Let me create 6 stereo auxiliary tracks, or auxiliary inputs. You'll see why. And let's do 2 mono audio tracks, and of course the master fader in stereo in 6. Let's go ahead and create that. Now I'm going to arrange this real quickly, first starting with colors. I'm big on colors, and you'll see why I'm doing this. Let me arrange the track that I wanted. These are my monos. That's stereo, so one will go. This is sometimes annoying. You have to click within the track to single it out, so now I can grab it and move it. But let me go ahead and continue. Let me move this over right here, that right there, and here we go. So let's start naming these, because the inputs and outputs of how we route these tracks are going to be important. So I'm going to set up all my mix buses first, and submixes, and then I'm going to do a mix bus. What a submix is, in my case, is any group of either instruments or a instrument type that I'm going to group together, or something like main vocal or a background vocal. And I like to use red colors for these, just like that, kind of bright red. And actually this one is going to become a dark red. You'll see why in a second. And these two are going to be dark red as well. These are going to be my mix buses. So the first submix is going to be for drums. Let's say that's my first instrument group. So we call it drums submix, click OK. This one is going to be my main, let's call it female main vocal submix. This is going to be female background vocal submix, and I have all my submixes. And so the input of the drum submix out of my buses, let's go ahead and name bus 5 and 6, rename that, call it submix drums. Okay, let me call this one right here pick one. You'll see why I'm choosing this out so far. Bus 37, let's make that submix female female main vocal. This one right here is going to be, let's call that again submix female background vocal. Alright, so I have my submixes. Now I'm going to do my mix buses. So let's say I would end up with 5 of these groups, which I will for different instruments. I'm going to want to have one auxiliary so I can control all those instruments or apply any plugins to them, or especially have one fader to control the whole instrumental. So this one is going to be called a mix bus, and the way I name these is a instrumental mix bus. And the input on this is going to be mix bus instrumental. Now I'm also going to have a mix bus for all my vocals. So let me do vocal mix bus. Input for that again is going to be one of these right here. Rename mix bus vocal, and the output is actually going to go into the main mix bus. So let me set that one up because I don't have that. So this one right here, this is going to be my, I guess you can call it master or the main mix bus. This is the last chain in routing all the sounds. So I'm even going to route my master fader, you'll see in a second, into this. So the input right here is going to be my main mix bus. Let me just make that here at the end. Call it mix bus. And analog 1 and 2 is going to be basically the output. This is the last chain, so I'm going to route this into my main mix bus. And this is basically progressively enhancing your individual tracks with sound. You'll be able to apply your plugins and all the effects. So let's take a look at the template that I already created for this, so you'll see kind of how this is going to look. And I'm going to start applying some plugins, which I'm going to save as a part of my template. But what you would do normally is go to save as template. You would save it as something. You can even create your own category, which mine I'm calling Studio Time, and then you can name the template whatever you want. So let's right now take a look at what the final product looks like. Alright, so looking at the final product of the mixing template, let's see what we got here. This may be a little overwhelming, but I'll explain it to you in hopefully a good way that you can understand. But you see all these tracks. We have to make sure that your inputs and outputs are correct for the submixes. So for example, the drum tracks, which are drums, let's say, audio files or drum MIDI files, are routed into, so they're outputted into the drum submix, and the drum submix is the input here, and the drum submix is outputted to my mix bus instrumental, which is this darker red right here. So let me go ahead and narrow these mixes so we can see everything, and I'll explain it to you one by one. So the first group up to the first red is my drums, and they have their own submix. Then we have bass instruments. They have their own submix, which is again also routed to the mix bus at the end. Then we have our strings with its own submix right here. Then we have our brass instruments with their own submix. So again, brass instruments, both outputs are routed into the input of the brass, which we see right there. And then we have our keyboards, and then we have our effects loops, because what I usually like to do, as opposed to putting the effects like reverb, delay, or something cool sounding like flanger, I don't want to put it on the individual track. I'd rather send my tracks into these loops. So they'll have these loops. Again, they have their own inputs. They're called instrument 1 effects, for example, right there. And then I have my output into the mix bus again, because they're all going to come together in the individual mix bus. Continuing forward, we have our vocal, female main vocal, routed into its own submix. We have background, female vocals routed into their own submix. Then two of these submixes are then routed into another auxiliary input that allows me to control the female vocals in a group. That's very useful. And again, you can set up the different processors, plugins, and so forth in this track if you like to. And then we have our main male vocal into its own submix. Male background vocals into their own submix right here. Then we have another auxiliary input just for the male vocals, so I can control them separately. And then I have another mix bus, which the female submix right here, and the female vocals and the male vocals submix are routed into the vocal mix bus, which is finally routed to the master bus instrumental right here, and we have our final output of all the music right there in this final mix bus. I also set up some effects loops for my vocals because I'd rather route the signals, the dry tracks into these effects loops, and do my reverb and delay that way. And here at the end we just have a track that we can record into for a bounce, just for the acapella, then for the instrumental, and finally my final bounce mix, which then I will import into my master session. Now another thing we notice here, let me go ahead and expand my view into a bigger mix. I've already in my session saved my plugins that I'm going to use for every track that I'm just I use it every single time from the start. Of course I can add different things later on, but this is what I'm going to use for the beginning. And I set them up this way. I set up my expand gate initially as the first thing, so I can get rid of the unwanted headphone bleed or any type of hissy sound or anything that the mics picks up that's just not the pure vocal. I just want to get the vocal wave file by itself. So it's important to note in what order these plugins go, because let's say I want to put my auto-tune plugin on this vocal track, I'm going to do it at the end, but after the the unwanted headphone bleed has been out, then I do my equalizer. For example, right here, I just set it up for the female vocals out of the presets. Definitely if you're starting out with Pro Tools, use your presets. They're very useful, and usually what I do, I use the presets initially, and then from there I'll start editing it the way I want to, adjusting the different frequency levels and so forth. So again, I have my expander gate, then I have my equalizer. After that I have my compressor, which again I'm using the vocal comp preset, and then I'll turn it up and down depending on the vocalist. And then lastly I'll have a de-esser set up for the female, which is stock is at 12 decibels. I'll like to turn it down to 8 so it's not, get some of the S's in there and so forth. I had it to, you can play with this later. But you notice I have this for every single main vocal, background vocal, and same thing for male. Now the only differences are that, pay attention to these different presets. The equalizer here, I have it set for female vocals, but the one in the male, obviously, I'll have the main vocals preset, and I'll go from there. And you notice that on my submixes right here, for the individual, parts of the vocals, I'll have another compressor. And again, as I mentioned before, this progressive way of not doubling, but adding layers or auxiliary inputs into your sound will make it sound much cleaner, as opposed to adding like 10 plugins and maximizers and limiters onto one single track. Because then you notice I go to my master right here, and in the master track I'm going to have my stereo width plugin, which kind of increases the sound and the volume of the whole track. And then I'll have my maxim plugin, which initially is disabled or is inactive because of recording purposes. We'll get to that in a second. But then you can also add compression, which I like to use different plugins like the TransXY from Waves compressor from a whole track, and you can either decide to mix with this on or add it after the fact. And I would suggest try both, because you may end up with different mixes. Alright, so how do I use this template when I record? There's a few things I gotta watch out for when I'm going to be recording, and I actually like to record in my edit window here. So I'm going to go ahead and use this, let's say I'm recording female vocals, I'm going to use this main female vocal track, and now that I have it preset, I'm not going to, when I record, I'm not going to route it into my bus, because it's going to create an echo and it's going to be unpleasant. I mean, you're not going to be able to record this way. So during recording, I'm going to set this to my main out. The mic in is coming in here, which you have to properly set up in your in and output window, and I'll show you that in a second. But make sure it's set to main out, and then I can duplicate these. And this is why it's so easy, and if I can work very efficiently, because let's say I know there's going to be multiple takes of this vocal, and there's going to be stacks and so forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and create 4 of these so I have them. And then I can go ahead and hit my record button, and the one that I'm going to record on, I'll expand it. Now another thing that we want to have on or off is my master fader. I'm going to definitely disable the maxim, because watch this, if I make it active, it's putting a 2176 sample delay on my track here, and I don't want to record with the delay on, even though I'm using delay compensation, which is a very useful tool in Pro Tools 9, but I'm going to turn this off. And I'm also going to additionally set my output on the master fader back to main out. And the reason I'm doing this again is because let's say I already have the instrumental created. The instrumental is being routed into the mix bus, so I don't want it to be affected by any of these things while I'm recording, because it can affect the volume and so forth. So I'm just going to set this to main again, and going into the setup window, obviously we want to make sure we record at the lowest samples possible, whatever your computer can handle. I found it, actually surprisingly, I found Pro Tools on the PC being more stable, and I heard this from Max as well, when you turn your processors to always one less than what's available. So I'm running mine at 3 processors at 99% CPU usage for each processor, and I found this to be better and more stable during recording. And again, delay compensation engine, I'm going to keep that on during recording, as well as keeping my low latency monitoring on. And what this is going to allow me to do, watch this, instead of having to worry about extra delays while recording, because you notice that this expander gate plugin right here, it's put an additional 192 samples of delay on this particular track. When I actually have my mic input in there and it's routed to main out, and this is why it's important, when I hit record, all the plugins are going to be bypassed, so there's going to be no delay that either the artist or you can hear in the system. And as soon as you're done recording, then you can hear your track pretty much 60% mixed, at least, according to the way I do it. So, but if I set this to the bus main female vocal submix and then hit record, you notice that these tracks did not get bypassed. So, and you're going to get this echo, which is going to be very annoying. So make sure that this is set to main out when recording. And again, let's review our input and outputs, because otherwise, I'm using the Mbox 3 Pro. So you want to make sure that wherever your mic is coming into, it's properly labeled. I use my channel 3 for mic, so that's why I labeled it mic, but you can label it whatever you want. Here are your outputs, and I renamed this to main out. It used to be analog 1 and 2. And then, of course, buses. We've already seen that. You could take a look at it in the earlier screenshots of how I have my buses routed. Let's just revisit that one more time. I go by all my instruments first into the mixed bus instrumental, then take care of my vocals, then all my effects, and final to my main mixed bus. I opened the track that I already recorded recently, so we can just go ahead and take a look at that, and so to show you a couple quick hints and tips for mixing. So let's take a look at this. And first things first, let's go to our setup window, playback engine. Let's increase the samples to high as possible, because that's what we're going to be mixing with, and we're going to make the delay compensation long. There we go. Second thing I'm going to do is let's get rid of any tracks from this template that I don't really need. So let's take a look at this, because there's so many different tracks and possibilities in the beginning, because then it's just so easy to take stuff out. You notice here that I already had an instrumental created for the song. I didn't need to create it from individual instruments, so I actually put the instrumental track into the drum submix, and I routed it into the drum submix, as you see here. So the bass, anything like that, all the way to the instrumental mix bus, I'll just go ahead and delete those, because we really don't need them. I will also delete my original drum audio stereo track and the instrument track, because we don't need those either. Going forward, we see we only have female vocal tracks, the leads or the mains, and the harmonies and the backgrounds. So I'm going to leave the female vocals and its submix, the harmonies, backgrounds, and its submix. I'm going to leave the submix for all female vocals, and I'm going to get rid of the male vocal track, its submix, background male vocals, its submix, and also the submix from male vocals, period. I'm just going to delete those so it's a little easier. And now we only have the things that we need in the session. A couple hints. What I do is initially first use your mix window to set all your panning and volume in the track. Also remember to reroute all of the tracks from main out. You have to reroute them back into your female main vocal, because now we're in the mixing process. So we don't want this going through the main output, because I'm going to be adding a compressor on that submix. And I made, for example, send the submix, I'll show you in a second, into a effects loop. We'll just leave these two to main out, and I'll show you why. So let's say these are now routed to my submix for the female vocals, and if I send this to a FX loop 1, let's say, which I'm going to apply my reverb on, then only the ones that are routed into the submix are going to be sent to that effects loop. The two vocal tracks that are left to go into the main output are not going to have the reverb effect on them. That's important to note. Another thing that's important to note is how much signal are we going to send from the female vocal submix into the reverb. And this is the fader that you decide how much signal you're going to send into your reverb plugin. You can always access it by going into there. Let me set up my reverb here. Just do simple deverb. And now this submix track is routed into my effects loop. Now I could do it on the individual level since I forgot to put these, or I want to increase the level, that I can just send. I don't want this left one, I want to do the stereo. If I want to increase the level in this particular vocal track, I can just raise that here, and I'm going to get more reverb out of this, if I'm going for a certain effect. Another thing to note here in sending tracks into different auxiliaries is the pre and the post. So right now, this is being post sent into the reverb, meaning that if I turn down this track completely down, there's nothing going to be sent to my reverb because it's sending the post dry signal out of this track into my FX loop. So if I turn this all the way down, even though my input signal level is turned up, it's not going to send anything to the effects loop. Now, one cool thing you can do is if you turn this to pre, this means that even if I turn this down, it's going to send the signal out of this track into the effects loop, and I can control how much is being sent there with this fader. So that means that any processing or fader right here or panning is not going to affect the signal being sent to my effects loop. You can create some cool sounding effects, with reverb, delay, or stuff like that if you want to do that. So that's one thing. And another cool thing is that if you want to, for example, let me get rid of these inserts. To quickly copy and insert, this is at least on a PC, you hit Alt and click on the plugin that you want to copy, and it copies it in there for you, which is cool because it's going to copy across the settings or the presets that I have chosen for this track as well. That's a pretty cool thing to note. Second, let's take a look at what I do in the edit window. You can either, when I expand my vocal tracks and I'm setting my volumes, you can either switch this from waveform into volume, which I can now control the settings during mixing, and if I want to affect only a certain part, I can put my dots on the automation right there and just turn down this particular vocal. Or of course we can look at the waveform the way it is, because I'm going to be doing additional things to the wave, and I'm going to look at my volume right here. This increases how much stuff you can see when you start adding your volume, automation, and panning on each track. So you can also view that on here again. So it depends. It's going to be your preference of how you want to handle this, and I use both depending on if I'm trying to tune two tracks together and I want to see the wave file slightly larger, like this for example, and I'm working on these two. I'm going to look at the automation for volume this way as opposed to doing it below it, because then I can't see as much of the wave file that I want to. Another cool thing is that if I want to see multiple plugins open at the same time, I'm going to hold Shift. Let's say I want to do have the gate up and have also the compressor and the de-esser. So basically I held Shift and I have all these windows open now, and I can mess around with the settings for each of these plugins at the same time as the track is playing. If you don't hold Shift when you click on your plugin and you just open it this way, and then you, let's say, open another plugin, you see it switches. But if I deselect this red button here, then I can open another plugin. So do we want to do another one? I'll scroll down to my master, and I want to see the stereo width. So this is the way you can have multiple plugins open at any different given moments. So that's another thing to consider, and by having all these submixes and mix buses that are routing your original tracks, you can do a lot of different things and enhance the volume that way. And I think it sounds a lot cleaner during your mixing to do that. So let's take a look at what I would do if I wanted to put this into a master track. Minimize all these, and I'm going to bounce my session. Let's create some markers here just for a quick example. Start and then end. we have these two, and this is important to know. So my full bounce is going to have the input mix, because everything's coming out of my final channel or final track of sound. I want that to be routed into this mix bus on my full bounce, because it's going to be recorded here. But also, so you don't get a lot of distortion and basically the doubling of sound effects or the loudness being affected, make sure you mute the mix bus, because now everything out of all these tracks is being routed into the full bounce, which you're going to be recording. So I'm going to enable my recording. Whoops. Obviously, first I have to do my full bounce. Click the region or the area that I want to record, and now I can record. And what this is going to allow me to do is record a separate wave file in here, or a bounce of the mix within Pro Tools, as opposed to bouncing it directly from here. Now I'm going to show you why I do that. So as I record it down here, I'm going to now set up my mastering session, and we'll take a look at why I do it this way.